To Dutch people in Rembrandt's time, the Near East, the Far East, were a blend of stories, objects, and pictures. The stories were dramatic. They were full of disasters and sickness at sea, capture by pirates, fights with the British and the Portuguese, and contact with strange peoples. They were told by sailors and soldiers and merchants who came back to Holland from the East, and you could read them in best-selling books of real-life adventure. Strange to say, these stories never found their way into Dutch paintings. What did get into the paintings were objects from the East. Sailors would bring back natural objects like shells, coral, and rare minerals, feathers, horns, armadillos, butterflies, even living parrots. Weapons were a favorite collectible. Sophisticated collectors could vie for carvings, lacquer boxes, tapestries, ivory and alabaster reliefs, manuscripts and miniatures. Those were the objects of private trade. Much larger were the imports brought back by the Dutch East India Company: cloves and nutmeg, silver and silk, porcelain and pepper, carpets and clothing. The variety and volume of goods available in Amsterdam was greater than anywhere else in Europe. By mid-century, there wasn't a household in the Netherlands without a touch of the exotic. If it wasn't a turkey carpet on the table, it could have been a mounted shell, a shawl of Indian chintz, or a bowl of Chinese porcelain. These accessories found their way into still life paintings, sometimes just to show them off, but sometimes as pious reminders of the vanity of all things. But they also come into portraits, especially of merchants and company officials who made their name in the Orient. We see them not only as goods in the households of portrait sitters and the boardrooms of civic groups, but in a special kind of portrait, a couple or a family would dress up as Orientals, sometimes with the identity of a biblical figure. And that brings us to the biggest category of all, in which the Orient infiltrated the imagery of Dutch art. With the thought in mind that the stories in the Bible took place in the Near East, artists would dress figures from the Old and New Testament in clothing meant to look Oriental. There was nothing very authentic or profound about this. The only piece of symbolism involved is that turbans were put on the heads only of Jewish or pagan characters, never of Christians. The first Dutch artist to practice this kind of Orientalism in his Bible paintings was the Amsterdam artist Peter Lastman. He was close to images of the Orient in Italian art. He was fascinated by their bright colors and exotic forms. When he came home, he dressed his biblical figures in Eastern garb. And as chance would have it, Lastman became Rembrandt's teacher, exercising a lifelong influence on him. Nearly all the biblical subjects Rembrandt painted had first been put into pictures by Peter Lastman. As Rembrandt's star rose, and as the number of his paintings and collections in the market exceeded those of Lastman, he became associated with the Oriental look. He employed it not only in Bible paintings, but also in some of his tronies, those are paintings of studio models, as a type of humanity. Most strikingly of all, Rembrandt even painted and etched himself as an Oriental. And so the Oriental look merged with the Rembrandt look. When pupils of Rembrandt and admirers of his work outside his studio put motifs like this into their work, people would say, a Rembrandt. So his fame contributed to the spread of Orientalism. That's what we could call the conventional aspect of Rembrandt's involvement with Oriental imagery. But he also carried out an entirely unique project, the only one of its kind in the entire 17th century in Europe. In the 1650s or 1660s, he made 25 copies of precious drawings that had been imported in one way or other from the Mughal Empire in India. The originals were portraits of emperors or court personages. None of his actual models has been found, except perhaps for two that look rather like Rembrandt's copies. But we know what they looked like. They were brightly colored decorative drawings with drawn frames on a dyed sheet of paper. Rembrandt's copies are in black or brownish ink on untreated Asian paper of a kind he never otherwise used for drawings. They concentrate on the figures and some items of clothing, in contrast to his paintings with inauthentic Oriental attributes, which were known and copied widely. These very authentic images remained unknown after he made them. So we can speak of two sides to Rembrandt's Orientalism that in the catalog to the exhibition I call convention, which was very popular, and uniqueness, which was really reserved for him alone. Rembrandt is one of the most many-sided artists who ever lived. He was interested in everything. So everyone who studies him will tend to gravitate to the sides of his art that interest them the most, or that cross their path at a given moment. My attention to his Oriental imagery was sparked, I must admit, by three outside circumstances around the year 2010. One was a discovery by a fellow scholar, a curator in the Rijksmuseum. The second, a coincidental event in the National Museum in Prague. And the third, a suggestion by a journalist who's also an art historian. In 2009, I was a fellow at the Netherlands Institute for Advanced Studies in a working group investigating the spread of Dutch art in Asia. My subject was Dutch artists in Persia, which touched only incidentally on Rembrandt. But we invited curators from the Rijksmuseum to hear about their contributions to the theme. One of them was Jan de Hond. He told us about a poem written in the mid-1650s in praise of Indian painting, which was called The Art of the Benjans. The author was Willem Schellings, who was also an artist. And it turned out that Schellings knew exactly one of the same drawings that Rembrandt copied, so that both of them must have had contact with each other and the owner of the drawing. This stimulated not only my interest, but also my competitiveness. A copy of the rare book in which the poem was printed, I have owned for more than 20 years, and I hadn't looked into it well enough. The feeling of regret and of a mischance is a powerful stimulus, I can tell you. So, when I was invited in 2010 to lecture at an exhibition of Dutch art in Prague, and saw that the poster image was the painting in the Rijksmuseum of a man in a turban, I gave my talk the title, Moors, Turks, Persians, and Benjans, Rembrandts, Orientals. Then came a very specific incentive. I was invited to speak to the press when a Rembrandt painting of a man in a turban in the private collection of Ilona and George Kramer was lent to the Rembrandt House Museum. After my remarks on Rembrandt's interest in this theme, one of the journalists, Eric Spons, said to me, "If the subject is so interesting, why don't you make an exhibition on it?" And after that, it was Eric Spons who broached the idea to Michael Philipp, and now being chief curator of the Museum Barberini, it happened, and the results are there for all to see. The catalog of the exhibition in Museum Barberini, I am proud to say, has essays by Jan de Hond and Eric Spans, and in the exhibition, you will see a key painting by Willem Schellings, and the man in a turban from the Kramer collection. I want to tell this for a particular reason, and that's to underline what a great role is played by chance in our lives, even our professional lives, but also how important it is to hold onto stimuli, connections, people, and works of art that matter to you.